The Innkeeper by Life Sketcher. Chapter 1251 Setting the Stage. That wasn't ominous at all, Lilith said, chuckling as she looked at the smoke rising from the top of Lex's head. Yeah, that's a thing that's been going on for a while, Lex admitted. More importantly, do you think we can use the heart demon? He turned to look towards Jeffrey, who was completely lost within the illusion now. With his own sanity crumbling to pieces, mind meld and the heart demons all attacking him together, there was no way that Jeffrey would be able to figure out what was happening at all. This was perfect, because Lex wanted to use Jeffrey to find the more important members, or even the more important bases of Sanguis Pluvia, but an ordinary tracker would not work at transmitting their location in such hidden and secure locations. Even if they worked, they would be easy to find considering all the security those bases no doubt had. For this exact reason, a heart demon was perfect. By nature, heart demons were very difficult to discover, which is what made them so dangerous to begin with. Originally, Lex intended to let Jeffrey escape and then follow him. When Jeffrey realized that he couldn't lose Lex, he would call for powerful backup, which he had other preparations for. Yet Jeffrey could not escape this zone for whatever reason. For situations like this, Lex had many contingency plans in place, and using a heart demon to track Jeffrey was one of the better plans. Lex wasn't worried that Lilith wouldn't be able to come to the trial of eternity. As the daughter of a Tao Lord, even if she was not particularly favored, it should not be a problem for her to go where and when she pleases. As for controlling the heart demon, he was even less worried. Lex was extremely familiar with how strong the influence of devils on demons was. Should not be a problem, she said, and placed a hand over the wyvern's heart and closed her eyes. After only a few seconds, she withdrew it. The heart demon will hide until the right time, then strike. I've also bonded with the demon, so it will stay under my control wherever it goes. I'll also be able to locate it anywhere in the origin realm, as long as a Tao Lord doesn't hide it. But his mind snapped, and he no longer cared. There was no use in protecting secrets if it got him killed, and if he revealed them and got freedom from the illusion, then all the better. Just to be safe, he activated his last contingency plan, and then flew into the sky as fast as he could, flying directly into the lightning beasts. Lex did not try to stop him, and as soon as he came close, Jeffrey's body was burned to ash from the lightning. Back in the origin realm, within a certain pod was an egg that suddenly cracked. A small reptilian head popped out, its eyes not filled with wonder, but panic and fear. Yet upon seeing its familiar surroundings, it relaxed. For a while, it waited for the illusion to end. But nothing happened. He was free of the illusion at last. But what if he wasn't? Paranoia set in, and the baby wyvern clawed out of the shell and hurried to find someone who can help. The reason he burnt his body to a crisp using tribulation lightning was because it could burn away all causality, eliminating any and all tracking methods, just in case. But what he never expected was that Lex was not tracking him through some spell or technique, but rather through a heart demon. So long as Jeffrey was alive, the heart demon could follow him effortlessly, unless he overcame the heart demon himself. Back in the trial of eternity, Lex smiled, but then looked up at the sky solemnly. He was not afraid of the lightning beasts. Far from it. Rather, Lex was greatly worried about somehow eliminating both the beasts without somehow triggering yet another tribulation. Growing stronger was great and all, but he had a war to fight. The timing was a little inconvenient. As if they could sense his thoughts, the two lightning beasts growled in anger, and then spread their wings. It was time for their showdown. Chapter 1252 Cut Through. Everyone in the trial of eternity felt a change take place. Just as they had felt a jolt when the first tribulation was triggered, they now felt the zone calm down. It was as if all the excess energy within the zone had been sucked dry. More importantly, the chaotic laws within this place, which were causing the environment here to become so dangerous, suddenly became docile and inactive. At that moment, many realized that whatever the problem was within this zone, it had been temporarily halted. The underlying issue which was causing this place to be so dangerous was still a mystery, and likely still existed. But at least for a while, the dangers it posed were gone. That also meant that there would be a wave of treasure hunters approaching this place, hoping to take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Giselle walked out of the building where she sat, and looked out into the distance. She hadn't gained much, and it wasn't worth it to stay here any longer. She would have to change her plans, but that meant getting out of here first. For some reason, she felt like Lex might have a way to exit this place. She really hoped he did, because she herself did not, and she did not want to waste a year here if it didn't bring her any benefits. She was aware that if she had a high enough privilege level at the Midnight Inn, she could use it to teleport elsewhere, but she had already used that and needed to wait a total of 10 years before she could use it again. What she didn't know was that for such services, the flow of time that mattered was the inn's, and it had already been more than 10 years at the inn since she used it. Giselle took flight under the scarlet light of the lava sea that was now hovering in the sky. She was not the only one paying attention to Lex, though she was the only approaching him. Countless other immortals had sensed the change in the zone, and knew that it had to do something with that maniac undergoing a lightning tribulation here, so they all watched. A very deep, very ancient wolf, the very one that recognized which ancient beasts Lex was fighting, also watched patiently. The twin beasts roared, the strength of their bellows causing a ripple in space, and they leaped down, as if pushing against the clouds would increase their speed. Lex, in turn, did not move at all. He stayed ready, his sword in hand, his gaze locked on the enemy. He would move only once, when the beasts were in the perfect range to strike, and end this with a single strike. There was no fear in his eyes, even though his body was covered in real scars from weaker lightning strikes. There was only immense, intense focus. Time and time again, Lex repeated a mantra in his mind. No more tribulations, no more tribulations, he said to himself, determined to use just enough strength to avoid triggering another tribulation. The beasts came close, and Lex moved. A single, deep beat traveled through space, as if his heartbeat had been enough to cause space to shake in fright. Despite his immense apprehension about triggering another tribulation, Lex felt like he should use a little more strength. So, for the first time, he gripped Naraka not with one hand, but with two. As if that single change had determined the entire outcome, Lex relaxed, and swung his sword with ease. There was no clash, no contest between titans and titanic forces. A single sword slash cut through the two lightning beasts like they were air, and then through the black clouds up above. Lex narrowed his eyes as he felt like, for a split second, he had cut through not just the tribulation clouds, but to an entirely different space altogether. But when he focused once more, there was nothing there. Chapter 12:53 Old Friend. Lex studied the clearing clouds for a while more, even using his left eye, but saw no traces of anything unusual. For a second Lex wondered if he had been mistaken, but then immediately dismissed that idea. Let alone the fact that Lex's senses were incredibly sharp, even if he were an ordinary immortal, it would not be so easy to fool his senses, and it would be even more unlikely for him to mistake nothing for something. That meant that, somehow, Lex had momentarily cut open a path to another place with his sword. He wondered if the key to doing so again was just a random cut, or if he had to cut tribulation clouds. Verifying it would require some testing, but Lex had no interest in doing that at the moment. Not only was he occupied with other matters, he had no idea what might be waiting for him on the other side. Since he suspected that this was something which could be accessed through cutting apart tribulation clouds, he could do some research on the topic first. It was unlikely that he was the first person to ever discover something like that. He made a mental note to look into whatever happened, but it was not a priority at the moment. Fortunately, he had not triggered a sixth tribulation, which was great. He closed his eyes, and felt his body healing for a moment. Despite taking some medication, he was far from completely healed, not to mention that his body was still catching up to his realm. Technically speaking, even his immortal body was still being formed. Lex flexed his shoulders, causing his bones to crack. He was a little stiff, but that was mostly because his muscles were cooked. They would heal soon enough. Mary, let everyone know, Lex said, cracking his neck. We're waiting on word from Lilith. As soon as she gives the signal, all teams are to be deployed. but call back Dr. Best. I have an idea that'll require his help. Mary appeared in front of Lex, this time wearing a judo uniform with her hair tied in a pony. You know he'll be cranky if you do that. He's about to. Yes, I know. That's exactly why I want him to stop. Trust me, it'll be worth it. Without saying a word, Lex extended his finger and placed it on Larry's forehead, transferring some information via mind meld. Jeffrey had already killed all of Larry's family long ago, but took DNA samples of all of them, and had clones of them made which he used as slaves for manual labor. He had suspected that he would meet Larry again, since he knew about Larry's ability to grow by absorbing metal. His plan was to repeatedly kill Larry's family in front of him whenever he met Larry again, slowly agonizing him until he broke his mind. He had quite a comprehensive plan on how he would do that. To Lex's surprise, Larry let out a sigh of relief as he closed his eyes. It's better to know than to not know, he said, explaining since he knew his actions would seem strange. Do you think I can come with you? To avenge them? Lex shook his head. It's too dangerous for someone at your level, trust me. Even I'm a little weak for what's about to happen next. If I find any of the clones, what do you want me to do? Lex asked. Larry shrugged, and turned away. Let them be free and live however they want to live. Even if they're clones, they're not the same people. I have to go help Raphael with some things. I'll drop by the inn when I'm free. We can catch up. It really has been a while. I'll look forward to it, Lex said, and let Larry go away. He felt sorry for his friend, but he also felt very curious about what Raphael was doing. There was more to his old teacher's son than he realized. Chapter 1254 Arrogance, I can do better. With nothing else left to do, Lex turned and looked towards the dragon. Truthfully speaking, involving dragons into his plans was a risky move on his part. Unfortunately, it was necessary. When facing an enormous organization that even the Henali struggled with, Lex wanted each and every asset he could gain, and dragons were one of the most powerful races in existence. If he could harvest their power somehow, it would go a long way towards fighting off Sandwis Pluvia. Unfortunately, asking nicely was not going to work, and no matter how irredeemably evil and corrupt Jeffrey was, he was not stupid enough to provoke the dragon race. It would have been nice if Lex found evidence of him trying to clone dragons or something, but Lex did not believe there was any entity stupid enough in the universe to try something as provocative as that. That only left one thing that Lex could do. He had to use his own infamy and hatred to attract them together, or as many of them together as he possibly could, and then use some other means to divert their attention. He had already arranged for how to divert their attention, he only hoped that it actually worked, or that the dragons didn't do anything unpredictable. Speaking of dragons, Lex used his treasure-finding glyph to search for the most valuable thing nearby and quickly grabbed it before putting it away. He owed Vera a considerable debt now, with all the prophecies she kept giving him, only telling him to pay what he thought that revelation was worth. The crystals in this zone which could help in passing tribulations were extremely valuable, and should make a dent in his debt to her. He wasn't really too worried about paying her back, but it would be nice to get some variety to shake things up. He couldn't just rely on the inn for everything and get lazy. With that done, Lex teleported to the purple dragon who had locked his legs. No matter what happened, he was determined to not kneel in front of the human once more. Suddenly, Lex realized why he had grown stronger. It was not enough to face Lex, but it should be enough to put up some resistance against Lex's domination. Unfortunately for the dragon, his domination had grown only stronger with his realm, but that was fine. Lex didn't intend to humiliate the dragon, not with domination anyway. Now then, with that taken care of, why don't we get down to business, Lex said with a smile. Though, given the state of his body, his smile made him look menacing instead of charming. Your dragon's breath, I can do better, he continued, a small streak of golden flames escaping from between his teeth. My skin is tougher than your scales, and my fingers cut deeper than your claws. The universe bends to my will, willingly or unwillingly, and that's before I begin even really trying. Lex did not summon his lotus tattoo, since he literally could not for now. He did trigger momentarily, and flashed a much stronger, deeper aura. He approached the dragon and grabbed its face, pulling it down so that Lex could look it right in the eyes. Your whole species is so arrogant. You put a bounty out on my head without even understanding the situation, and then send a newborn dragon to take me down without understanding my strength. For a moment, Lex continued to stare into the purple dragon's eye, its entire body under Lex's control. Then he grinned. But even arrogance, I can do better, he said, his voice radiating with powerful pride. The reason I didn't hurt you is so that you can act as my little messenger boy. Go back to your elders, let them know. Within the same realm, there is no dragon who can stand against me, and only at a higher realm is a dragon worthy of becoming my mount. Dragon's Bane is not a name I chose for myself, but in the future when the universe sees me, they will see me standing atop the head of a true dragon. If you have the guts to face me, then come. The universe will witness your challenge of me, and the universe will witness your failure. Lex let the dragon go, but it was not able to move or retreat even if it wanted, since Lex's influence remained. If you want to find me, you can follow this, Lex said as he walked away, his back to the dragon. He left behind a vial of green metallic liquid. Since Lex had the demon guiding his path, he did not need the liquid, but it would do a good job in leading the dragons to the right place, assuming it worked. If it didn't, well, Lex had faith that the dragons would find him anyway. Truthfully, after spending so many years with Pal, he knew better than anyone just how wide the scope of a dragon's power truly was. Chapter 12:55 Difficult Decisions. Lex was about to return to the Midnight Inn when he sensed a gaze fall on him. If someone even as much as thought about him within 100 miles of his body, Lex would be able to sense, which is why it was so easy for him to detect someone looking at him. Much more than that, Lex even sensed the emotions within the gaze. They were filled with curiosity, but much more than that, they were filled with a competitive spirit. How was it? Did you find what you were looking for? Lex asked, even before Giselle revealed herself. Unfortunately not, said the ballerina, without divulging that he was responsible for that failure. Even then, Lex could easily surmise what had happened. If you don't mind me asking, is there something specific that you're hoping to achieve by finding such obscure treasures? Maybe I can help you out. Giselle shook her head. Not everyone can go through a bunch of tribulations on a whim like you, she said with a hint of accusation. Some of us need to work hard to grow stronger to face our future tribulations. Lex snorted, not believing her at all. But then again, it was true that not everyone had as easy access to treasures as he did. I'm kidding. I just have a challenge coming up that I'm preparing for. Some of the treasures I'm searching for are to buy others' help, while some of them are to genuinely aid my own growth. This place, for all the valuable treasures it still holds, no longer has what I need, so I was thinking of leaving. Do you have a way out of here? Giselle knew a few things that most in her realm did not, mainly concerning the ongoing realm wars which were wreaking havoc across the universe. The fact that the Innkeeper was so openly displaying a realm with a faster flow of time was a blatant challenge to some immensely powerful entities. She felt afraid. Spending even a second here was incredibly dangerous. She wanted to immediately use her privilege to escape this place and teleport to another planet. At the same time, she was immensely tempted. The faster flow of time would not only aid in her cultivation, it could rapidly increase her understanding of her affinity with time. She dared not directly peer into the secrets of the law of time, but developing her affinity and letting the natural influence her affinity allowed her over time should not be a problem. She was caught between two immensely critical decisions. Ultimately, her thoughts went to Lex, and his overwhelming performance within the trial of eternity. Even though, on a universal scale, he was still incredibly weak, she had to admit that even the topmost forces of the universe might have trouble making someone that powerful. Of course, she herself did not count. She was an exception due to her unique circumstances, and was more than certain that if she went all out she could go toe-to-toe with Lex. But when she considered that he had only just entered the immortal realm, she felt slightly inferior. She clenched her fists and directly went to rent out a meditation room of the highest level. At the same time, Lex walked into his personal meditation room and looked at the giant, slumbering dragon there. Pelvalen, or rather Pel. Jr. was wearing the midnight in uniform, meaning that the massive dragon was wearing a suit. This was not an aesthetic thing, though Lex had to admit that the dragon looked quite dashing. Instead, the purpose of the suit was solely to help the soul trapped within the body to be able to move the body. In the distance, Jeeves was standing on a stepladder, hand-stitching something near the tail of the dragon. Lex ignored him, appeared near the head of the dragon, and gently laid out the cultivation mat he had received as a gift, before sitting down. It was time for his first cultivation session as an immortal. Chapter 1256 Casually Growing Stronger. His cultivation technique automatically informed him about how cultivation changed now that he was in the immortal realm. For the most part, cultivation was now divided into two steps. The first, as usual, was to absorb energy into his body and refine it, though that too had become more complex than it was before. Basically, prior to the immortal realm, cultivators in general just generically absorbed spiritual energy. Yet that was no longer sufficient within the immortal realm. Now, he needed energies of a higher level to cultivate. If, for example, he were in an environment such as Earth, which only had low levels and concentrations of energy, not only could not cultivate at all, but replenishing his energy reserves would also take much longer than usual. In essence, a planet with a 2-star rating would barely be sufficient to sustain his level, but he would need the environment of a 3-star planet to be comfortable, and have sufficient energy to cultivate to reach a higher realm. One of the reasons Lex did not need to absorb energy to directly reach level 5 Earth Immortal Realm was because his body was already oversaturated with the highest quality energy he got from cultivating within the Midnight Realm. The cultivation technique did not give him a breakdown of energies, how they were ranked and differentiated, but Lex could simply inherently feel their differences. This was something he would need to study in greater detail, for what the cultivation technique did inform him of was that his growth will be affected by the type of energy he absorbs. It also let him know of the most powerful and highest-ranked energy in the universe, Proto's energy. How could he forget it? That was the energy he absorbed, in the smallest quantifiable amount to end up evolving his cultivation technique. Something told Lex that it would not be easy to find such energy once more, or that he should depend on such an energy for his cultivation. While it might make him incredibly powerful, there was one drawback to cultivating with increasingly powerful yet rare energies. He'd already made a list of some impressively powerful ones he'd learned about, including Reiju, phoenixes and even Jinn. But getting his hands on their corpses, the way he had with this dragon, would not be simple. These were matters for another time. Lex closed his eyes and began cultivating. It felt so easy. It felt so simple. When Lex was immortal, spiritual energy traveled in his body via meridians, but now that he was an immortal, it flowed freely through his body, yet that did not cause any chaos either. There were patterns to the flow, traveling through a certain sequence, orbiting his golden core, which was also the seat for his tenet when it was inactive. Lex felt his mind tremble as he came to a realization that the outline of the flow of his energy formed the array character for supremacy. As the flow of energy within his body gained momentum, his body subtly started to absorb energy from outside. His cultivation technique kicked in, absorbing the strongest, most powerful attributes that the dragon underneath him could provide. Yet, almost immediately, Lex felt a certain blockage. Something deep inside of Lex sensed that the gains he could get from the dragon were limited by his own body, and though his technique could strengthen and enhance his body beyond anything he was supposed to ordinarily achieve, it could not change what his body was on a fundamental level and so ultimately remained restricted. This sensation did not come from his cultivation technique, but something deeper and more inherent to his existence. Then his physique activated, in conjunction with his cultivation technique. Lex was under the impression that his physique could only work on other humanoid beings and not himself, yet that's exactly what was happening. His physique was actively and subtly changing his body, allowing his cultivation technique to absorb even more from the dragon than it was already doing. Chapter 1257 Heart. Lex immediately felt the changes, and felt his physique activate as well, yet instead of being alarmed by it, Lex paid more attention to it now. He wanted to gain complete control over his physique so that it would stop randomly being triggered. It had been fine for now, but it could cause him some huge issues down the line. Since Lex's brain had evolved when he became immortal, now able to directly peer at the secrets of the universe, understand them and comprehend them, it was much easier for him to pick up on things now. He immediately perceived that there was a lot more to physiques than it seemed. NOV.LB/JNN. Unlike bloodlines, which had a definitive origin, physiques could occur randomly and did not need a history in one's family tree for it to occur. That meant their origin was not simple, which became evident to him as he observed his physique in action for the first time as an immortal. There was something fueling his physique, but whatever it was escaped Lex's vision. Even his left eye couldn't trace the source. That definitely aroused his curiosity, because Lex was under the impression that laws were the underlying cause for everything. They defined all of reality, and so should have been at the root of all occurrences. Yet Lex could see countless laws working on his body under the influence of his physique, yet they were being directed by something else. The actual laws at work did not attract Lex's attention at all. Those were just the ordinary operations of laws. Anything and everything that occurred within the universe was as a result of the normal operation of laws. That was not the same as what immortals did, who could wield laws as they desired, bringing about changes and results outside their normal operations. The muscles that made up the dragon heart were even more special, not in the least because they had to pump dragon blood which was thick and viscous like flowing lava. Just like every other being, the heart of a dragon contained the strongest and best that their body had to offer, making it nigh indestructible. It was not as durable as a dragon's scale, but compared to all the other muscles in a dragon's body, its heart was the most resilient. Instead of mimicking the quality of the heart, Lex's evolution directly replaced his human heart with that of a dragon, while the rest of his body adapted subtly to accommodate such a change. Lex was reminded of the fact that his older sister, Belle, was said to have the heart of a Valkyrie, which allowed her to use the actual powers and abilities of angels. He wondered what impact the change in his heart might have on him. He would have to wait to find out. Meanwhile, he continued to observe his other changes. While not as drastic as his heart, his other organs changed as well. He just hoped his skin wouldn't turn into scales. Fortunately, that is not the aspect of a dragon that his skin took on. Instead, as the organ responsible for the temperature control of the body, his skin took Lex's fire immunity to a whole new level, while also giving him direct control over the temperature around him. More importantly, domination fused into his skin like dragons' might was fused into their very bodies. This was bound to result in an interesting change. Chapter 1258 It's time. Even though Lex did not need to breathe to live ever since he became an immortal, and could literally live the rest of his life without taking another breath, he felt a mild sense of suffocation as his lungs began to change. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Lex activated his right eye, imprinting the very glyphs and arrays which gave birth to golden inferno into the walls of his lungs. His lungs, which were growing strong enough to cause gales and hurricanes, suddenly started to morph in a different direction. The evolution which was started from his physique, guided in a certain direction by Lex himself, was taken a step further by his cultivation technique. Since Lex's growth using the technique was dependent on his own actions and it saw an opportunity to elevate him based on his own actions, it immediately began to adapt his body. But then as his lungs adapted to generate and tolerate the flames of golden inferno, the rest of his body adapted to support the ability. His stomach gained the ability to digest anything and everything, becoming a way in which he could absorb energy from any material in case he needed it. Lex's gallbladder, his spleen, his intestines, his pancreas, everything evolved, shedding some of its older functions and gaining new ones to suit his new status as an immortal. The minutes flowed by as Lex's condition slowly went towards the peak, a state he was reaching for the first time in his immortal state. Pell Jr., who had inhabited the dragon body for years already, for the first time, felt a change within it. Over the past few years, it had steadily been growing stronger, nourished by the energies of the realm. To a small extent, that nourished Pell Jr. as well, but for the most part it just oppressed the soul further. But now, for the first time, it sensed movement in the opposite direction. The energy and strength within the dragon's body was finally heading towards weakening, even if it was only barely comprehensible. The more it felt how panicked Jeffrey was, the more it grinned. The wyvern had long since gone through numerous cleansing techniques, ridding itself of any tracking methods. But no matter what it did, it felt like Lex was always watching him. He could feel Lex's gaze on his own neck, and a chill traveled down his spine. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong, which it tried to explain to its superiors, but none took him seriously. Finally, feeling desperate, he reached out to Her Majesty. He received approval for an audience, but before he could be taken to her, he was brought to a secure facility where the personal guards of Her Majesty checked up on him. "I'm telling you, I've already gone through countless precautions. No one is tracked dash." Jeffrey's voice was caught in his throat when it noticed a familiar, green aura suddenly emerge from his body. The guards suddenly released a deep killing intent as they moved towards Jeffrey to detain him. Meanwhile, deep within Jeffrey's heart, the heart demon suddenly felt threatened. Those guards, whoever they were, might be able to find him. Unwilling to wait any longer, he sent the final signal to Lilith. Some time later, Lex, who was still meditating atop the dragon, heard Mary's familiar voice. "Lex, it's time," she said. Lex ended his meditation, and looked up at Mary, who was dressed in the familiar style of suit worn by the Midnight Battalion. Finally. Chapter 1259 Panel Upgrades. There was a sudden, invisible change that occurred throughout the Origin realm. It was not a shift in the energies of the realm, nor a change in the major powers that existed within. It was a change in destiny. Such things were actually a frequent occurrence, for the future was in a constant state of flux. Destiny, too, was flexible, at least in how it occurred, even if the ultimate final outcome was a little less flexible. There were countless such subtle laws that flowed and guided the direction of existence towards what it should be. Some felt that this manipulation was a guidance of powerful forces, while others simply thought this was a large-scale application of simple, fundamental forces such as the diffusion of heat, which always sought to balance out. While the underlying cause for such things was open to debate, the fact that they existed, and were measurable and comprehensible was a fact. Which is why as soon as the change occurred, a mysterious force which seemed to be waiting for it covered the change, so that it was imperceptible. The change, and the veil appearing to hide the change happened at almost exactly the same time. No one would notice, at least for another few minutes. Even after they noticed, they would not understand what happened for a little while longer. Hundreds of people appeared across the realm, and then disappeared. Armies started moving out, and then vanished. At the same time, in-workers teleported to hundreds of new planets and silently connected them to the Midnight Games, without anyone noticing. For now, no new armies arrived on those planets. Yet in the Midnight Inn, the countless guests who were watching the game suddenly noticed a new screen pop up. It was small, so that it would not intrude on anyone's viewing experience, and one could turn it off if they wished. Yet the fact that it appeared so suddenly surprised them. When they enlarged the screen to see what it held, their breath caught. This was no new competing world, nor was this a planet at war, being invaded by insects. This was the Midnight Inn. An army stood in front of them, thousands, no, tens of thousands strong, all wearing the vaunted suit of the Midnight Battalion. Lex watched the screen as well. The first time that he had sent out the battalion, he had unlocked the battalion panel, which gave him access to formations that the battalion could use together. That is how the Midnight Mech was born. "How long do you think you'll need?" Lex asked Pell Jr., who had activated the effect of his suit. 10 minutes, give or take, Pell Jr. answered. 10 minutes within the inn meant that it would be around 3 minutes in the Origin realm. He could make it work. "Don't be late then," Lex said as he prepared to leave. "Don't forget to connect the planet as soon as possible." Lex nodded. "Hey Mary," Lex called as he disappeared from his meditation room, appearing on a random planet the inn was connected to. Now that the system has recovered a lot of its functionality, shouldn't it be easier to connect to new planets? Actually, there have been some changes. Within a realm already connected to the inn, as long as you approach any celestial body, you can purchase a ticket for it. How long the inn takes to connect to it depends on the star rating of the place, but in general the speed has decreased drastically. Now, instead, you have to purchase higher-level tickets to connect to new realms, though establishing a connection to any new realm should take a year at minimum. The year is according to the flow of time of the realm you are connecting to. Lex nodded, then looked at the coordinates of the place where Gerard was supposed to be. Traveling across galaxies was not something an Earth immortal should have been able to do easily. But Lex did not care about what should or should not be easy. A moment later, he disappeared once more. Chapter 1260 Wasting Time. Her Majesty's guards were in the peak heavenly immortal realm, which is why Geoffrey stood no chance to avoid their grasp, not that he intended to avoid it to begin with. He was panicking as it was when he saw the green aura emerge from his body, panic once again spreading through his mind. How could this green aura still be covering him? Not only had he ditched his previous body, cleansing the connection between them through tribulation lightning, he had then proceeded to repeatedly cleanse his mind, body, and soul so that there was no chance for Lex to trace him at all. Their previous fight had left Geoffrey rattled, and he believed that Lex's plan for revenge was genuinely a huge threat. It was as if everything was playing right into his hands. Unless. Geoffrey began looking around frantically, exerting his mind to try and determine if he was still in an illusion. This had to be fake. This had to be, unless. As Geoffrey's sanity slowly unraveled, the heart demon within him smiled remorsefully. Were it not for the two incredibly dangerous guards outside, this would have been its opportunity to devour Geoffrey's heart and take over his body, effectively becoming a new Geoffrey. Unfortunately, it could not. "What the hell is this?" asked the first guard, a tall, slim orc. He peered into Geoffrey's body, trying to understand what that unusual green light was. The other guard, who looked like a massive leopard, scanned the planet they were on, observing for any anomalies. It detected signs of teleportation, though it couldn't locate where it happened. "Geoffrey, did you betray us?" the orc asked as he choked the baby wyvern's neck. "No, no. Why would I betray you? I've been trying to tell everyone that we're being targeted." "Of course we know we're being targeted," the orc scoffed. "But even the best of the Henali Dao lords cannot find us. Of that, we have made certain. Come now guys, do you really think I'd be underprepared after good old brother Geoffrey told me everything about you?" Meanwhile, the tiny wyvern within Lex's grip seemed to have gone insane, repeatedly muttering "this is an illusion" to itself. It is impossible for Geoffrey to betray the organization. The fact that you would even suggest such a thing reveals just how little you know about us. "Oh, but weren't you accusing Geoffrey of exactly that just a moment ago?" Lex asked, cocking his head. Before he could get an answer, the two heavenly missiles behind him fell out of the sky. Lex lost all control of them, unable to touch them at all, and they became inert as well, unable to explode. The two immortals struck again, this time grabbing onto Lex. But instead of an illusion, he was a clone, and as soon as he was attacked, the clone popped. Another Lex appeared in the distance. The two immortals frowned. "Guys, let's make it easy for one another. You just bring Damien to me, and I'll forget this whole thing ever happened. We can part on decent terms." Instead of responding, the heavenly immortals instead asked him a question. "I can clearly feel your aura. You're only an earth immortal. How can you fool our senses of laws?" "No wait, you can't possibly do that. Who is backing you up? Is it the Henali?" Lex only shook his head. Why would he answer such a question? The answer was, to spend as much time as possible. "After brother Geoffrey told me that you're wary of the Henali, why would I ever work with them? No, I just went to a broker and struck a deal." A black portal opened next to Lex, and a devil stepped out. Chapter 1261 Plans Within Plans. The two heavenly immortals narrowed their eyes, observing the devil with great concern. Although it appeared as if the devil was standing next to Lex, both the devil and Lex were just illusions. The laws that they saw seemed to indicate otherwise, but they had already determined that there was some entity messing with their senses, an entity far stronger than Lex himself, and possibly far stronger than themselves as well. Look, I'll say it one more time. Things don't have to get ugly. Just hand over Damian William and we'll just go our separate ways. None of this has to get ugly. For a few moments more, the two heavenly immortals did not respond, as if deliberating. But then they smiled. Little Lex, I already told you once. You're in over your head. Jeffrey's figure suddenly disappeared from the illusory Lex's hands, and appeared next to the two heavenly immortals. He was still tiny in stature, but his entire demeanor had changed. He no longer looked panicked and on the verge of a mental breakdown. Instead, he looked completely calm, as if everything was playing out according to his plan. The atmosphere around the planet suddenly turned a light shade of red as a formation activated and covered the planet, trapping Lex within completely. On top of that, incredibly powerful spirit senses began sweeping the planet, searching for where his real body was hidden. You were planning this? Lex asked curiously, though his expression did not change, nor did that of the devil beside him. In fact, the devil summoned a pina colada with a bright pink umbrella in the glass and began to sip from it. You're a scary guy, Lex, Jeffrey admitted honestly. It takes a lot to scare me, and you did it, which means I never took you lightly for even a second. You know that seal inside my mind you tried to look through? I can hide my consciousness behind it as well. So while my outer consciousness was a bumbling buffoon, my inner consciousness was arranging everything. I was completely confident that you'd find a way to track me. Even if you didn't, it's not like I lost anything. Turns out, my plan was a success. Lex smiled. It seems like while he was planning in secret, so was Jeffrey. Now it would come down to who had planned more thoroughly. You're overconfident, Lex. Just because the organization that supports you has a single Dao Lord, you think you're all that. But we're not even scared of the Hanali as a whole. What makes you think you can do anything to us? Lex did not answer, and instead just kept looking at Jeffrey. It's impossible. You can't replicate this place in an illusion. Oh, can't I? Lex asked softly, and raised his hand into the sky. If this is not an illusion, then it would be pretty strange if I could, let's say, summon the lightning tribulations once more, without being the target of it. Bersh destroyed another mountain, but Lex was still not there. Above the illusion's hands, black clouds started to appear, floating towards the sky. These are just tricks. You can't really. Jeffrey began, but his words were caught in his throat when the sound of thunder rumbled across the planet, and he felt the familiar aura of a lightning tribulation. These are just tricks. You can't really. Jeffrey began, but his words were caught in his throat when the sound of thunder rumbled across the planet, and he felt the familiar aura of a lightning tribulation. Everyone looked up, and the sky was red no more, instead covered in black lightning clouds. The sound of thunder roared across the planet, like the steady beat of a war drum right before a battle. Jeffrey started to hyperventilate. If this is not an illusion, it would be pretty odd if, say, I just summoned a suit-wearing dragon to fight for me, Lex whispered, yet Jeffrey heard the words like thunder in his mind. The dragons hated Lex. They would never work with him. Never. I've found him this time. Bersh exclaimed, and launched an even stronger attack against another mountain. Yet before it could land, a massive claw appeared in thin air, blocking the attack as if it was blocking the wind. A very handsome-looking dragon wearing a dashing suit appeared in front of them, out of thin air. You're right. This totally can't be an illusion, Lex chuckled. Chapter 1262 Mental Breakdown. When Lex teleported onto the planet where Jeffrey was, he was not the only one who was making a move. Countless forces had already begun to act. The war had begun, his targets just didn't know it yet. Involving a Dao Lord would be dangerous as it would attract attention. Fortunately, he knew plenty of celestial immortals as well. Are you sure we can't follow you? Asked Fahad, the celestial immortal Hanali. Not yet. Wait for my signal, said Lex, accepting the immortal's enchantments onto his body. It would take another celestial immortal, and a strong one, to discover Lex. This was the absolute minimum precaution he had to take, since he didn't know what he would be facing. As soon as Lex teleported onto the planet, he hid himself, and waited. His arrival on the planet went undetected, since everything about him was hidden. Yet he saw two immortals acting against Jeffrey, which wasn't good. Jeffrey was still integral to their plans, so Lex purposefully revealed an illusion of himself for the others to discover. While the two heavenly immortals were distracted, he used his stealth to kidnap Jeffrey. At the same time, he began to search Jeffrey's memories to see if this was some kind of trap, but discovered nothing useful. Now Lex needed to delay long enough for the inn to connect to this planet, since he had already initiated the process. Hopefully, the dragons would also trace Jeffrey till here, since the green aura was apparently still on him. In that sense, delaying was better, so Lex began wasting time. He even conjured the illusion of a fake devil to distract everyone. Without Fahad's enchantments this would be impossible, since he could not fool two heavenly immortals, but with them it was a piece of cake. A few minutes of banter later, the inn was connected, but Lex was taken by surprise when it turned out Jeffrey had been putting on a performance. You really can't trust terrorists these days. Fortunately, Lex was also just putting on a performance. I told you to just hand over Damien, Jeffrey, but you wouldn't. Now watch and suffer as I defeat the last restraints of your feeble mind, and pull that information out of your brain. Pell Jr. roared, causing not just the planet, but the whole star system to tremble. The red formation around the planet shattered, and across the galaxy many dragons felt an unfamiliar dragon marking his territory. Thunder and lightning flashed in the sky, for though Charles' tribulation was not as absurd as Lex's, it was far from simple, causing the laws in the region to fall into chaos. Across the Origin realm, many strong beings finally noticed that something was being obscured, but they could not tell what it was just yet. On the planet, Jeffrey started hyperventilating as Pell Jr. and the two heavenly immortals flew into the sky, beginning their combat for dominance. The real Lex strolled up behind Jeffrey, touched him with his finger, and caused him to fall into a real illusion. His body and spirit, which were greatly sensitive to illusions now, panicked and warned the wyvern that he was in an illusion, but the wyvern misunderstood. It thought that this was merely Lex finally allowing him to sense the illusion. Show me all your other secret plans, Brother Jeff, said an illusion of Lex who walked up to the wyvern. Show me how else you plan on trapping me. Within his heart, with the danger of the two immortals gone, the heart demon finally struck, beginning an internal battle to take over Jeffrey's identity. But with his mind falling into chaos, Jeffrey could not put up any resistance at all. No, this can't be happening. Jeffrey said. This is not real. This is not real. This can't be happening. Losing his mind, Jeffrey summoned a locket and crushed it. Chapter 1263 Insight. The plan to bring down Sanguis Pluvia could not be simple. It was clear that they were working with the Fugan to fight the Hanali, and could possibly even be a part of the Fugan themselves. The reasons behind their attacks against the Origin realm were unknown, but it was a fact that they had managed to hide from the Hanali. Lex did not, for a moment, think that he was stronger or even smarter than any Dao Lord. The only advantage he had working for him, according to the research he had done, was that Sanguis Pluvia were focused solely on hiding from Dao Lords, and did not consider anyone else a threat at all. That made sense, in a way. If they could even hide from Dao Lords, then how could those weaker than Dao Lords ever possibly find them? Lex had a theory, and it began with plotting everything within the Midnight Inn. The separation of an entire realm, not to mention the protection of the inn's own destiny-level formation, created the possibility that all of Lex's plans would remain undetected. That is why, while not all, a majority of Lex's secret meetings occurred within the inn. The second thing was finding a way to their core base or bases, discovering their most important members. Whether they themselves had celestial-level cultivators, or if they could borrow them from the Fugan, was unknown. But what was known was that they left no traces. Even after the in-workers infiltrated countless bases, they could not find any information about the core operations and personnel of the terrorist group. They only found hints and traces of their upcoming actions. So then how could Lex get to the heart of the organization? Lex's anger, held firmly within, yearned to be let out, but that could never happen until Lex caught and killed not only Damien, but the whole organization backing him. Since the real Lex was still hidden from detection, and was still touching Jeffrey, causing him to suffer from mild illusions, he noticed that a part of the seal within his mind crumbled. This was both interesting and a little disappointing. Lex immediately read through a number of Jeffrey's memories, but at the same time, he was pushed away. Jeffrey suddenly went from being in the middle of the Earth immortal realm to the peak of it. Moreover, his new memories insinuated that Jeffrey himself did not know much of his past, or even his own secrets. They had been locked away for unknown reasons. Lex still did not get to the bottom of things, but he did learn some interesting things. Abruptly was ruled by someone that Jeffrey referred only to as Her Majesty. Lex hadn't been able to get any more information, but even that was pretty good. He also discovered some tidbits about Jeffrey's own secrets that were hidden in the now unsealed part of his brain. "You're going to pay for this, you maggot!" Jeffrey roared, his wyvern body growing larger as more power funneled into it. With burning red eyes he looked towards Lex's illusion, but he wasn't there. "You can't hide from me," he declared, a feeling of pride swelling within his chest. A sudden, sharp pain shot through his neck, and Jeffrey's vision began to change. He saw his own body, and he saw Lex, casually sitting on Jeffrey's back holding his sword. "Who the hell is hiding from you?" Lex scoffed. "I'm a little disappointed. I knew you were a demented little worm, but who knew that you don't just make clones of others? Even you, yourself, are just a clone. I wonder where the real you is." Chapter 1264 Say Her Name. Suddenly, a lot of things made sense to Lex. Jeffrey's obsession with cloning, or perhaps it was the obsession of Abruptly, was quite notable. Damien had taken up to cloning, but he was at most trying to recreate a perfect clone of Moon, which was harder than it seemed for reasons he could not understand. Jeffrey, on the other hand, liked to clone anyone he came across, or anyone who attracted his attention. Maybe it was because, deep down, he knew that he himself was just a clone of someone else, and so wanted to create others just like himself. Whatever his personal or mental issue was, it was a fact that this Jeffrey himself was a clone, though that knowledge had been sealed away so that he himself did not know. It was only upon undoing a part of the seal on himself that this knowledge came out, and it clearly brought Jeffrey a lot of distress. After Lex cut off the wyvern's head, he destroyed the soul fragment within, and observed the rest of its body regrow its head. "I understand making clones of oneself using a technique. The soul is the same, and even the clones are still yourself. But creating biological clones just creates new souls to inhabit the body, just living inside the clone as its own person. Why would one do that? Do you think the real you uses the clones as a backup in case it ever dies? Will the real Jeffrey crush your soul and take over this body if it needs to?" As the body grew back its head, the wyvern twisted and attacked Lex. But the attack went through the body like it was nothing, and the rage in the wyvern's heart was suddenly replaced with a hint of fear. Was it still caught in the illusion? Even after undoing its seal and raising its power? How was that possible? Guessing what the wyvern was thinking, Lex asked it a question. "NOVLB //JNN. Are you so sure that you really unsealed yourself? Or maybe do you just think you unsealed yourself? Whereas in truth, we're still back in the trial of eternity, with only a few seconds having passed in reality." The name is quite apt, don't you think? Within the trial of eternity, you are facing an illusory trial that will last all of eternity. The anger in the wyvern's heart suddenly faded, and doubt once again rushed into his mind. It was the tip of a cobra's face. The cobra was gold, with streaks of red, blue and green covering its magnificent scales. The cobra was in the celestial realm, Lex could comprehend that much. But within the celestial realm, where its strength lay, Lex knew not. It did not matter. He was prepared even for this. Mary, send word, he said in his mind. You must not utter the name of Her Majesty, a booming voice roared across the planet, shaking it to its very core, and nearly causing it to collapse in on itself. The cobra was not even looking at Lex, or anyone else. In fact, it looked incredibly pissed at Jeffrey. But the more it was like this, the more Lex was determined to push the wyvern further. Clearly the identity of Her Majesty was a huge and sensitive secret which would upset many things. Since that was the case, he was determined to learn of it today. Since Sanguis Pluvia had crossed him, then it should be prepared to suffer the consequences. Good attempt, Jeff, Lex's voice suddenly echoed across the land, attracting even the cobra's attention, and driving Jeffrey further into madness. But in my illusions, I am king. A portal opened behind Lex, from which Emperor Jotun walked out wearing a grim expression. Since he was assigned by the Henali to represent them at the inn, naturally he was one of the first Lex was able to recruit into this plan to rid the origin realm of this vermin. The situation on the battlefield changed once more, but the greatest change was the spreading crack on the seal in Jeffrey's mind. It could not hold on much longer. Chapter 1265 Unleashed Rage I. Lex had a wonderful impression of Emperor Jotun, at least as far as his competence and strength went. The man worked closely with the Henali, and was the sovereign for a very large intergalactic empire. That was not the kind of thing a weakling could achieve, and even among strong men, it required a certain level of influence and power across the realm. It required a kind of foresight many did not have, and a kind of brain that could encompass countless variables. Most importantly, it required unquestionable personal might, so that others would not covet what was his. But even though the arrival of the Emperor freed Lex from the restraints of the cobra's aura, Lex could tell that the Emperor, as strong as he was, would have an uphill battle in front of him. It was a little unbelievable that a random celestial summoned by Sanguis Pluvia was so much stronger than the Emperor, which is why Lex didn't think that the cobra was just a random celestial. Chances were high that he was very close to the top of the organization. There was an element of irony in the fact that Lex was closer to uncovering the very core of Sanguis Pluvia without being even the slightest bit close to discovering Damien's location. But if Lex helped take down Sanguis Pluvia, then even if he didn't find Damien now, he would be a lot easier to find. You cannot hide from me, Jeffrey, Lex's voice echoed in the wyvern's ears like an infernal howl from the very depths of Garvitz. Up above the planet, a dragon fought with two immortals, causing quakes and tremors that traveled through space to the stars. Somewhere unidentifiable, the Emperor was exchanging blows with the cobra. Oddly enough, their fight caused no explosions. The planet was collapsing in on itself, irrevocably set on the path of destruction. Soon, it would explode, or shatter, or suffer death in some other way. The laws all around them vibrated like strings on a musical instrument, producing music that could literally change the universe. Gravity fluctuated, becoming stronger and weaker with every second. It even started to change its direction. Water turned solid without turning to ice. The ground exploded upon the slightest touch, turning to gas, without losing its solid state. Jeffrey had once tortured a human on Earth called Jackson Pollock, and then killed him when he got bored. The world around him felt like the wyvern had been transported into one of the paintings he used to do. Or maybe that was Lex's intention to begin with. Was this all by design? Lex could no longer hide, so he didn't try to. Wielding Naraka, he honed his sword intent and attacked the wyvern with the intention to kill. Yet before the sword met flesh, he heard the sound of glass cracking. The only reason Lex wasn't already dead in the fraction of a moment he was exposed to the aura of the Tao, was because within his body, he already contained a trace of Tao, absorbed from the chaos amber resin. Yet even that could allow him to exist for only so long. It was enough. Lilith teleported to Lex, hovering a hand over his body, extending whatever protection she had to him. "You're not going to believe this," Lilith said, her voice filled with immense surprise, excitement, and heartfelt admiration. "Even I can't believe this. You are either the luckiest or unluckiest living being in existence. Through sheer dumb luck, or maybe through means I cannot comprehend, you have done something impossible. Either the Innkeeper is protecting you in secret, or someone else is, Because there's no way you did this on your own. I might even get to meet Lord Father for being involved in your plan. Lilith laughed in a mirthful voice, completely ignoring Lex, who was suddenly gasping for air besides her, or the eyes that began to open in front of her. Every other being around them was dead, with the stronger immortals barely holding on, and even that too because the time that had elapsed was too short. Yet Lilith cared not at all. Lex, whose mind was reeling at being exposed to the Tao, tried to understand what had happened. But he couldn't. The only thing that made sense was itself the most illogical. Was there a Tao Lord hidden inside the seal in the wyvern's mind? But why? In his last moment, when the seal broke, before the wyvern was disintegrated, the heart demon read some of its memories, and then so did I. The wyvern was a clone, one of 100 million spread across the origin realm. Considering how many of them there are, it's not so surprising you ran into him. All the clones share their memories, to an extent, and they all share the same purpose. The eyes narrowed as Lilith spoke, and tried to focus on the devil, but it was no use. Lilith carried on her the true, undiluted, and genuine aura of a Tao Lord. There was nothing that the eyes, as weakened as they were, could do to her. Each Jeffrey clone has a seal within him, and the purpose of each seal is to hide and contain a billionth of the aura of a demi-Tao Lord. That's the reason they've been conducting terrorist activities across the realm. By causing a tear and disturbance in the fabric of the realm, they give an opportunity for that aura to sneak from outside the realm to within, hiding inside the seal in the clone. That's why it seems like each activity is carried out by Jeffrey, even though they're countless galaxies apart. It's because they're just clones. Each and every terrorist act is conducted by a different clone, ready to absorb and hide the aura of the demi-Tao Lord. Not to mention, there's a reason why Tao Lords haven't been able to locate Jeffrey after he conducted such an attack. It's because his aura is hidden by the Tao. Lex wiped the sweat off his forehead, but was alarmed to see that he was sweating blood. Though he had survived, his body had suffered severe shock from being exposed to the Tao. In fact, though Lilith was protecting him from further harm, he was already extremely weakened. But that's not all. There's a kicker, one that I find almost unbelievable. The reason why Damien was so focused on your sister was because he suspected that after some strengthening and modification, your sister's body could actually host the demi-Tao Lord, continuing to hide her as she was smuggled into the realm, one piece at a time. Chapter 1266 Unleashed Rage 2. The origin realm shuddered under the anger of those eyes, yet Lilith laughed without a care in the world. Or maybe, just maybe, it was shuddering under the weight of Lex's anger. His brain was sluggish and his body was on the verge of shutting down, but even in such a state there was a faint hiss of recognition within his own eyes. It seemed like the star system had ceased to exist and the origin realm was holding its breath. Something big was about to happen. The forces that had obscured fate and destiny had begun to move, and an irreversible change was occurring within the origin realm. It was not just the inhabitants who were unknowingly undergoing a shift, it was the entire realm itself. The entire realm's destiny had been changed in a way that should have been impossible. A mere mortal had interfered in the plans of beings of Tao. Yet that was exactly what had happened. Lex himself remained largely ignorant of the magnanimous undertaking he had achieved, but others were not. Yet, for now, they were content to watch. Since Lex had begun, he should be allowed to play out his hand. Can you imagine that? The body of a mere mortal, housing a demi-Tao Lord without a seal, allowing her to exist within the origin realm without suffering rejection? It's unimaginable. Nobody else believed it either, which is why Damien was undertaking the project alone. But just thinking about it is insane. Lex activated his right eye, creating countless formations around himself to speed up his healing and recovery. But seriously, none of it is as crazy as a mere immortal interfering with a Tao being. Do you realize how crazy that is? It's literally impossible. Beings of Tao will know anything and everything you do to interfere with their plans, even if you don't know you're interfering with their plans. I know you go around telling everyone that the Innkeeper tells you to take care of things on your own, but he must be keeping an eye on you, hiding you from view, allowing you to achieve this. Even then, man oh man. This is going to cause some waves. The eyes had stopped trying to suppress Lilith by now. Instead, they became impassive once more. A portal opened behind it, and then another. A dozen portals opened, and then 100, then 1,000, and the numbers just kept increasing. One wyvern after another flew out of the portal, in mere seconds forming an army. A million Jeffreys suddenly arrived around Lex, all glaring at him with immense hate. This is so interesting, Lilith continued. You ruined the plan of a Tao being. Now the question is, can you survive doing that as well? Will the Innkeeper interfere to protect you? I heard he's not even in the origin realm anymore. It'll be a little tough for him to step in. He, looks like you've gone a little over your head, said one of the Jeffreys in a demented tone, as it turned its head and looked at Lex from an unusual angle. Did you know that when one Jeffrey dies, the rest of us get his memories? Asked another wyvern, this one as big as a mountain. You called yourself a king, right? From where I'm standing, you look like a worm to me. The Henali set up protection around those two. Since they played such a critical role in revealing this illegal immigrant, then they deserved all the awards and attention such achievements afforded. During all this, no one was paying attention to Lex anymore, which is why they didn't realize that the reason he was not speaking was because he was still recovering. The moment he recovered, he glared at the eyes that had become the center of the conflict. You! Lex roared, raising his sword up to those eyes, his voice cutting through the noise of the war. I recognize you. Suddenly, everything stopped, and everyone looked at Lex. The Cobra, the Eyes, Fahad and Noor, the Emperor, all the wyverns and soldiers summoned to fight, all suddenly turned towards Lex, and noticed that something about him had changed. Faced against one of the most powerful beings in existence, after suffering near death just from being exposed to its aura, Lex dared to raise his sword to those eyes, and there was not an ounce of fear in his voice. I saw those eyes every time I crushed his hopes and dreams. Every time I foiled his plan, he looked at me with those angry eyes. Every time he felt hopeless, he showed me those fierce eyes. Every time he faced defeat at my hands, he showed me those very same eyes. Compared to those eyes, Lex really was pathetically weak. There was nothing about him that could even survive their gaze without the protection that the Henali were giving him. Yet for someone at the Earth Immortal realm, which was the lowest realm of anyone in this battlefield, Lex cut an impressive sight. The pride and arrogance of dragons that Lex claimed to be better at, in this moment, oozed out of his very skin and bones. His domination, his sword intent, his tenet and his domain all synchronized as one. Faced with an overwhelmingly stronger foe, there was no way Lex could claim supremacy. Yet he dared to challenge, nonetheless. When Ra messed with the Innkeeper destroyed him. When Ra messed with the Midnight Battalion, I crushed him. When Ra tried to take over my body, I ended all his hopes. I have fought his manifested clone many times, so I recognize those eyes well. You messed with my family, woman, so mark my words that I will destroy your family first, and then I will come after you. Lex, who had been holding on to his anger for so long, could hold on to it no longer. Ra had tried to take over Lex's body. This woman, who was clearly related to Ra, wanted to take over Moon's body. An image of a sword shone deep inside Lex's eye, resonating with his anger. His heart, which had begun turning into a dragon's heart, began evolving even quicker, as if it was feeding off his anger, and beat for the first time as a proper dragon's heart. The lotus tattoo on Lex's back suddenly recovered, causing his aura to explode. He was still nowhere near the strength of the eyes, but everyone else on the battlefield took notice of him for the first time. From elsewhere, deep in the origin realm, a heavy voice rumbled. Sekhmet, daughter of Ra, you were banished from the origin realm, yet you dared to return? In that case, stay here forever. Chapter 1267 Unleashed Rage 3. Sekhmet, daughter of Ra. The identity of the mysterious being behind Sanguis Pluvia had been revealed, which should not have been as simple as it was. If it were so simple, that one only needed to peer upon the eyes and recognize the familial traits the eyes bore, then there were many who should have recognized her long before Lex. As a being of Tao, Sekhmet had naturally taken precautions to protect her identity from being discovered. Let alone recognizing her from her eyes, even if she stood in full view of everyone, no one should have been able to peer into her identity. This was further exacerbated by the fact that when the Innkeeper attacked RA, all information about and related to him was wiped from existence, at least on lower levels. That meant very few beings in existence even recalled Ra's children, at least, they did not recall them as children of RA. The fact that, of everyone here, Lex was the one who overcame these minor obstacles as well as the powers of Tao, made everyone pay even more attention to him. More and more, they began to truly suspect that the mysterious and enigmatic Innkeeper had taken Lex as an heir. There was no other explanation for what was going on. Lilith, who was also observing, wondered momentarily why Lex would be affected by the oppression of the aura of Tao, if he was unaffected by other aspects of it. But she didn't think about it for long. Who was she to question how a Tao Lord did things? Maybe that was just the Innkeeper's way of keeping Lex from becoming complacent. Much more importantly, Lex had now ruined the plans of a Tao-level beings twice, on various levels. It was as if his very existence was expressly pushing the boundary of what was, and wasn't impossible. Lex himself, however, was focused on Sekhmet. It seemed that, for whatever reason, he and his family were intimately tied to RA and his progeny. Once or twice might be a coincidence, but so many times made him think that something deeper was at play. Do it. Attack. Take no prisoners. Within the Midnight Inn, the guests finally saw movement on the window with the Midnight Battalion. They teleported to a new world, and without hesitation joined together to form the Midnight Mech, before attacking a massive, walled city in front. So far, all the battles in the Midnight Games had been against insects. This was the first conflict against other forces. Wait, is that the mechanical Hydra? A guest suddenly gasped in astonishment as he spotted something in the window. The mechanical Hydra was an incredibly famous AI warrior, which was considered immortal and unkillable. That's Harmon, the Angel of Death, someone else exclaimed. Am I seeing things? Is that Princess Mia of the Marzu Empire? One after another, the guests saw some of the most powerful and renowned warriors of the Origin Realm attack the city alongside the Midnight Battalion, laying siege against an unknown foe. On other planets, outside the view of the guests in the Midnight Inn, armies seemed to appear out of thin air, attacking without warning. Fleets of pirate ships descended from the skies. Swarms of demons emerged from the darkest depths. Monsters from the pits of Garvets rained from the skies. Angels flew out of the sunlight. Aslan Deathsworn, the celestial blight, made his presence known. Unfortunately, whoever learned of his presence died shortly after. Chapter 1268 Unleashed Rage 4. On a densely populated planet, a tall, muscular human wearing an orange hoodie walked around one of the largest cities. With a certain range of him, random people seemed to suddenly die, though the range was so vast that no one connected him to it. Later on, autopsies of the bodies would reveal that the victims exploded from intense vibrations, yet no one other than the victims ever felt like anything was ever amiss. Z was content sharing his music only with his targets. It was not so bad to hear a pleasant melody before dying. Certain planets suffered beast tides, where every single beast on the planet suddenly revolted and attacked the Sandwis Pluvia bases, even though there was no history of such a thing on those planets. On one such planet, a golden sloth closed its eyes to take a nap, while on another, a deer with large antlers looked out into the distance. There was one planet that was suddenly engulfed by plant life. Trillions of clovers suddenly grew out of the ground, attacking everything in sight, using all other living beings there as fertilizer. There was another planet where it suddenly started to rain fire, that tore through everything that blocked its path, and burned the very souls of the victims it touched. Luther stood atop a mountain, looking at the world with his hands folded behind his back. Elves, dwarves, sentient beetles, humans, devils, and more, all races suddenly appeared out of nowhere with the intention to kill. The tide of Lex's wrath covered the entire realm, making sure that none of the Sandwis Pluvia could escape. Or at least, ensuring that the low-level members of the organization could not escape. All the stronger ones, the important ones, had already been summoned by Sekhmet from across the galaxy to fight alongside her. Or at least to buy her some time for whatever she had planned. Naturally, since one of their own showed frenzied courage beyond rhyme or reason, they felt inspired. Yes. This is how it should be. When a dragon is crossed, even beings of Tao should fear and tremble. Instead of seeing Lex's actions for the insanity that they were, the dragons took it as the highest, purest, most devout display of the dragonkind's creed. In this universe, nay, in all of existence itself, only the dragons were supreme. Let the world, let the realm, let the universe itself feel the wrath of dragons, the Dragon King declared, and opened a massive portal, leading to the battlefield. An endless thunder of dragons unleashed their dragon's roar, and took flight, blotting out the skies as they traveled through the portal and joined the fray. The dragonkind, however, did not move just yet. He watched his kind take flight, as if a general watching over his armies. Yet his gaze, which was previously locked onto Lex, moved to the side just a little. In a corner of the battlefield, Charles Best was undergoing his thunder tribulation, protected from the chaos of battle by the Henali. Naturally, since they were working with Lex, they had to protect his allies as well. "Little Charles, it looks like you did not die back then," the golden dragon murmured. "To think of all the powerful beings from back then, it is you, a small little elf, who survived." The dragon's eyes seemed to lose focus, as if he was suddenly transported into a distant past. Chapter 1269 Tsunami. War raged all around Lex, destructive on a level that he could not even comprehend. Heaven Immortals alone had a mastery of laws so intricate while simultaneously so immense that Lex could not even understand what was happening. Reality was akin to a drug-induced hallucination, except the monsters in this situation were quite real. Sekhmet made no move, and continued to consolidate her power, and the Tao Lords of the Origin Realm made no move either. For them, getting rid of Sekhmet, now that they had discovered her, was akin to a flick of a finger. The problem was that the repercussions of that finger flick might extend to a lot more than just Sekhmet herself. One of the reasons why the Innkeeper was never prosecuted for using his powers in the Origin Realm was that he had such fine control over his power that it did not negatively impact the realm at all. Secondly, it was a display of power so immense that it gave the Henali genuine doubt about whether they could handle him or not. In such a situation, considering how amicable the Innkeeper was, it was best to push matters under the rug. But even among Tao Lords, not everyone had such precise control of their powers. It was like trying to use the heat from a nuclear explosion to heat up cold pizza. Theoretically, it was a possibility, given that the circumstances were just right. Practically, no one dared to try it out themselves. So an impasse formed between the beings of Tao, while those below that realm fought desperately, trying to change the tide of battle in their favor. The most frustrating, tragic thing for Lex was that among all those present, he was one of the weakest, so he could not actually go out and fight. He had so much anger bubbling within him, but nowhere to vent it. Lex had just undergone the greatest power-up in his entire life, and then walked into a battlefield where he was the weakest. Once more, after a very long time, he was hit with that same feeling he had when he started cultivating. Then the army of dragons let loose their dragon fire. The eyes suddenly narrowed, and used some of their powers, though they didn't rely on the Tao just yet. As long as she didn't use the Tao, the Henali wouldn't either. The moment she tried, she would see a true retribution. So she was limited to using her strength without the influence of Tao. A tsunami of dragon fire swept across the Origin Realm, burning everything hostile in its path. Even a star dared not shine its light on a being of Tao, yet the dragon fire of an army of dragons targeted her directly. Of course, it never reached her. All those that Sekhmet had protected were also well. But the dragons had only just begun. They raced forward, the single greatest fighting force in the entire Origin Realm. Lex had heard on multiple occasions that the only reason that dragons were weak was because their arrogance did not let them work together. While seeing them work together now, Lex genuinely believed that even the Henali might not be able to tame this realm if the dragons worked together like this all the time. The countless wyverns behind Sekhmet trembled in sight of their superiors. Even though all of them were destined for death anyway, which meant there was nothing left to lose, they felt fear nonetheless. The tide was almost completely turned. Just the arrival of the dragons nearly granted them victory. Fahad and Noor were getting ready to trap Sekhmet's eyes. But Sanguis Pluvia was not without allies of its own. The darkness of space rippled, and from within stepped forth a Jorlim. Then, there was another. The fight was just beginning. Chapter 1270 Divine Envoy. The Fugan had made their move. The Jorlim had appeared, and the army of dragons, as impressive as it was, could not overwhelm the Jorlim so easily. A galaxy itself was nothing more than a buffet table for these monstrosities. NOV/LB/JNN. Fahad, I hope you don't renege on our deal, Lex suddenly said, completely unconcerned about the shift. Yes, in exchange for helping us take down Sanguis Pluvia, you can receive the heart's blood of a Jorlim. I'll get it for you, fresh. Good, Lex said, and turned his mind towards the battle once more. Although he'd like to take credit for the arrival of the dragons, he was slightly afraid of claiming credit as well. He knew that his little statement might provoke a few dragons, but wasn't this a little too much? Fortunately, the dragons seemed like they were not concerned with Lex at all. In that case, there was only one more fighting force he had arranged for his backup, though now he was hesitant to call them. He would wait and see how things developed. If the situation seemed bad, he would have to take the risk. Have you guys already prepared for such a situation? Lex asked Fahad. The real Fahad was out there fighting, but he'd also left behind a clone to protect Lex, and now Lilith, who was beside him, giggling like a schoolgirl. Taking care of Jorlim is tricky, Noor said with a troubled expression. Within the same realm, I think it's practically impossible to kill them. But they can be held back. For that, we will personally dispatch celestial-level Henali warriors. But this will definitely mess with our battle plans. You know, so far, not a single Jorlim has been killed in this war. In fact, the loss of a World Eater was the greatest victory we've had in that regard. The situation was getting extremely chaotic and complicated. Ordinarily, Lex would have left by now to stay out of everyone else's way. But this was not a fight that would last forever, or even too long. Sekhmet was still absorbing the aura from countless Jeffreys, while more than a fair number of them had been captured or killed by others. Sooner or later there would be a turning point in this battle, and it would likely be when the last Jeffrey clone died. Lex was curious to see what that would be. Lex began to debate with himself if it might be a good idea to summon his final backup, when the battle changed once more. It's too late, Noor whispered. We've been sent to the Mirage. No one can leave until the Tao Lords let us out. The fight will continue here, and it will be much more desperate. Lex frowned, and tried to exit to the inn, but felt something preventing him. This was not like those times that space was blocked, or was too weak to support teleportation. He directly felt something restraining him from returning. Can people still come in? Lex asked suddenly. Of course, Noor responded. In fact, everyone still fighting the Sanguis Pluvia will most likely be sent here. The Mirage is a special place, under the control of the Tao Lords. No damage here will reflect onto the origin realm. Likewise, nothing happening outside will harm us here. Something very serious must have happened for them to send us here. It was most likely the appearance of that golden dragon. He had the aura of a demi-Tao Lord, but I've never heard of such a being of Tao in the origin realm. Yup, the situation was rapidly getting out of hand. In that case, might as well truly mess things up. Mary, send my agreement to the Divine Envoy. It's time to get the other deities involved in this mess. Within the Midnight Inn, an inn-worker suddenly set off and delivered a letter to a guest in a certain room. Finally, the guest whispered, and then disappeared. On Earth, the very same guest reappeared in a lavish castle, filled with noble women wearing the most elaborate pieces of jewelry. First, the same guest put on a ceremonial robe covered in perfect diamonds, before walking into the inner chambers of the castle where a gorgeous woman sat on a throne. My lady, Lex has agreed to your demands. We can now move out. Alyssa Harmony, the winner of the first Midnight Games, former YouTuber and current divine envoy of the deity of diamonds, smiled.